Welcome to the Interpreting Wine podcast with me, your host and founder of the podcast, Lawrence Francis. It's never just been about wine for me on the podcast, and today's episode features my first foray into Mezcal. With my guest, Thea Cumming of Dangerous Don and London Mezcal Week. We first hear her origin story in setting up the Dangerous Don brand. She talks Mezcal in Mexico. We get a Mezcal 101, and she looks ahead to London Mezcal Week. I'm also happy to announce that I'll be covering London Mezcal Week for the podcast, and that sponsorship opportunities will be available. Please listen right to the end for more information. Enjoy.
Grew up in a little fishing village called Lyme Regis, which is actually in Dorset, but I was born just outside of Lyme Regis, which was Devon. And as growing up, we all worked in bars and restaurants. I worked in the Cobb Arms, which is down on the seafront in Lyme Regis, for years when I was at school. And then went and lived in Falmouth and did an art foundation year down in Falmouth, and again continued the hospitality. And after that went up to Manchester, where I did a degree in marketing and business. And there I met a good friend, guy called Tom Adams, who I later ended up working for. So when I came to London, started out working for a media agency, and that just wasn't for me. After growing up in restaurants, you're just used to being busy and running around, and sitting behind a desk was just not what I was cut out for. So about a year into being in London, my friend Tom from university, he was opening a restaurant which was called PICU, and a very good friend of mine, Johnny Warner, was the general manager. So I had an interview with Johnny and got the position of, I think I was working on the door, or I was a waitress. Can't remember what my position was, but anyway, PICU at that time they'd just got barbecue food over to London, so it's really popular, and it was a great time, and it was a little tiny place just off Carnaby Street, the queues around the corner, and it was just really good fun. So that got me back into hospitality, and I realised that that's what I enjoy and that's where I should be. And I think I was fine with leaving an office job to go and work in a restaurant again. So worked there for a good couple of years. Jamie Berger, who has been a continuous source of support since then, he wrote the list, and it was mainly bourbon. So my dad loves whiskey, and so I got into bourbon, and was really interested around that as a spirit. And so after leaving and going and working in a few other jobs, I decided to travel. Well, I wanted to drive around the States with my best friend Molly, and so we got a car and we flew into San Francisco, and then we drove all the way down through the States and ended up in Kentucky and Tennessee, Louisiana, and so went to all the distilleries there. We actually didn't take as long as we probably should have done going to all the distilleries, because the Kentucky Derby was on the first day we arrived. I got a little bit caught up in that. However, we got to see all of the distilleries, and then I travelled through Central America, and I wasn't supposed to go to Mexico. I was supposed to go and work on a vineyard in Argentina. But for whatever reason, as it is when you're off, I ended up in Mexico. I met up with my ex-boyfriend there, actually, and that's where I first started drinking Mezcal. It was in this little place called Puerto Escondido, and we were staying in this amazing surf lodge called Sunset Point, which had the most incredible view, and the sunsets were incredible. And so, there was a guy living opposite called Frank, and it was actually my ex-boyfriend that went over and met Frank and tried the Mezcal for the first time and brought it back over. But basically, he was making a Mezcal version of Patron, so he was blending coffee and other ingredients and Mezcal and selling it locally, and he was a bit of a legend in the area. And so then, I remember sitting next to the pool at Sunset Point and just saying, I really want to work with Mezcal, and I want to work and maybe set up a brand, and I want to call it Dangerous Don. Dangerous Don's my dad's nickname. So yeah, me and my dad are really close, and he's always been a bit of an inspiration to me. So it just made sense, and obviously Don makes sense in Spanish language. So I drew a little picture of a skull when I was sat next to the pool, and I was like, this is what I want it to look like. And since it's definitely changed. But yeah, then after that trip, I came back to the UK and like just continued my research, like reading everything I could and learning about Mexico. And I moved back to Lyme Regis and was working in a bakery. Saved up a bit of money, and then flew back over to Oaxaca a few times and just went to Oaxaca City and introduced myself to everyone that I could. And I was fortunate enough to meet some amazing people. A guy called Alvin Starkman, who does this thing called Mezcal educational tours, and he took me out, and actually he introduced me to my now producer. So then the first trip we didn't get everything done that we needed to do, so I went back for 3 months and had some great people help me register the brand and develop the product. And then I came back to the UK. Unfortunately, through my hospitality days before I left, I was fortunate enough to be introduced to a distributor who I had the liquid in a little plastic bottle and a picture of what I wanted it to look like. But by this point, my friends who are designers had mocked up a bottle. So I had a mock-up of what I wanted it to look like, and I had the liquid. And they agreed that they would take the product, so I went back to Mexico and was able to produce the product. I got a little bit of investment at that point, and then so I was able a little bit. Oh no, actually that wasn't. We got a personal loan. So we went back out to Mexico and then used that loan to produce the first product, and then came back and started selling it like 2 years ago. So yeah, 2 years ago now. January 17 it arrived. And yeah, fortunate enough to sell the first batch. So went back out to Mexico to produce the second batch. So the first one was 750 bottles. Then the second batch was, I think, double that or just over double that. And yeah, so in the first couple of years the first year of selling in London, like obviously wanting to connect myself with everybody who worked in the agave spirits category, Jamie Berger, who I used to work for at PICU, I went in and met him, and he said there's 3 people in London that you need to talk to if you want to like learn about Mezcal, or they were just the people that I needed to speak to. One was John Anders, who worked for Amethyst and who's the brand ambassador for Del Maguey. The second was Melanie Simmons, who has a brand of Mezcal called Kiki Riki, and she was running a shop called Bramston List on Chatsworth Road at the time, which specialised in agave spirits. And the third was Tom Bullock. Tom had this company called Spirit Bear Mezcals, and he was one of the first people to not one of the first people, but he set up a company bringing over specialist mezcals to the UK. So I reached out to all of them. Tom was amazing help, and he's been a mentor ever since. And John, again, met me in the Amethyst shop in Soho and was like, it's going to be hard, but I think you should do what you're going to do. And the other person was Thomas Estes. And I met Thomas outside Cafe Pacifico, and he was amazing. His one thing that he said to me was, make sure you're doing this all for love, and that is so true. And Melanie, and so I went into Melanie's shop on Chatsworth Road it must be 2 years ago now, and introduced myself, and we'd both had a little bit of the same story because she had sort of started drinking mezcal mainly in Puerto Escondido as well, and we knew a few of the same people from having stayed there for a bit. So we just got chatting and talking about agave spirits and ranting a bit, and ever since then we just stayed in touch. Obviously both being brand owners and based in London, it's always good to have that support. And then probably around the start of the time that we started getting to know each other, she said that she really wanted to start this event where small brands in London didn't get charged to be part of a trade show, because all of the shows are quite expensive for smaller brands, so it's often difficult for them to get the exposure. And she just wanted to create a free platform for brands to be able to integrate themselves into the UK drinks market, which is a great market to be in, but a difficult one to get into. So that's when the idea of London Mezcal Week was born. We're now in our third year, and for the first few years, we didn't charge the brands anything to participate, and it was a consumer-led, but we also had industry, so we had wholesalers and distributors come along. And it's just keep growing because, obviously, our intention with London Mezcal Week is just to help the category grow. And I think one thing that's great about agave spirits and agave spirits in the UK is everyone's so integrated with one another, and they very much support each other. There's not as much competition as you would expect because we're a small category, and so ultimately everybody needs to support one another for the category to grow. And there's so much space within agave spirits because bars aren't only ever going to have one, and there's not that many brands here at the moment, so yeah, we're all working together, so it's been great. So the long and short of this story is that I have a brand of mezcal called Dangerous Don, and I'm also the founder and one of the partners of London Mezcal Week.
I love the way you weave that together because it's not always that easy for guests to do that, and I just thought it was an awesome story. You really kind of took us along there with you on that journey, and I just think you gave anybody that's listening a really sound introduction to you and to the category, and just in a really exciting, accessible way. Something that, and of course I could pick up on lots and lots of things there. I like the sort of deviation in the story away from the wine world, and maybe you'll sort of look at that again in the future. But one of the things that I'm super interested about here is you mentioned there about there not being that many brands here in the UK or in London at this time, and the fact that you've been backwards and forwards to Mexico and you've had to set up there and you've had to deal with, I'm sure, lots of bureaucracy and et cetera over there. I'm just curious to almost transport us back to Mexico now and give us a sense of how sort of, I guess in a sense, how far ahead of us are they over there, in terms of the number of brands, the way that mezcal and agave spirits are being enjoyed. Is the market completely different, or are we sort of in our own way catching up, and do you ever see those sort of different markets converging in some way?
It's vastly different. It's about as different as you could possibly get. Mezcal is one of the oldest spirits in the Americas, and it's something that's very much integrated and ingrained in Oaxacan Mexican culture. Mezcal's been produced in small regions of Mexico for hundreds of years, and generations and generations and generations through family. For example, my mezcalero that I work with, my master mezcalero, he's fifth generation, and mezcal is something that's integrated in every part of culture into, it's just something that I always say it's like our tea. Like you would just have a mezcal, like there's a mezcal for every type of day, and like we drink tea, and like mezcal's more consumed in Mexico, but they're miles and miles ahead of us, like, because they have the exposure to so many different varieties. And like mezcal, although it's got a denomination of origin, agave, a spirit distilled from an agave plant, can be produced anywhere in Mexico. And if you think of the different terroir, because terroir is a big influence in mezcal as well, that exists in Mexico, as well as the vast amount of different agave plants that are growing, the different types of mezcal and agave spirits that are being produced is just endless. It's limitless. Like, even the greatest people that know the most about agave spirits are never going to be able to try everything. And I think, obviously I'm going off the question a little bit, but that's one thing that's really exciting about agave spirits. But certainly the US is obviously the US is the biggest market, and then Mexico is the second biggest market, just based on size. And we're miles behind. I mean, we're miles behind. I think we've got at London Mezcal Week, we've got 40 different brands, and there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of brands in other countries. So what's happening at the moment in Mexico is that so many people are starting brands. Everybody, mezcal sales have grown year on year for the last 5 years, and it's one of the fastest growing spirits categories. So with that, there comes a lot of interest from the bigger players and external sources and investors and people that just want to get into the drinks game. So traditionally, there was a handful of brands which, really led the way in growing the category. And now there's so many more smaller brands. Now, there being a lot of smaller brands is great. Obviously, is there enough room in the market, especially in the UK? Probably not at this point. One of the reasons we have London Mezcal Week as well, and one thing that I do is when I go and do a training with a bar, I'm not just talking about my product. I'm talking about 2 or 3 other products that I work with, and I'll always do it about the mezcal category in general, because people don't know what mezcal is yet. They're still confused. Is it tequila? There's just a lot of misconceptions about what mezcal actually is. So first and foremost, we need to grow the category, and that is all through education. And, mezcal is a bartender's drink because they understand the complexity and the variety and, how it can be used. And I think that's something that hasn't been communicated to consumers before. So for that reason, there hasn't been a demand for a vast amount of mezcals. As also, we haven't really had much really good Mexican cuisine in the UK before. And so we've never really understood how amazing Mexico as a country and a culture and a producer of amazing food and drink is. So until people's preconceptions of that change, it's difficult to grow the category. But certainly there are more and more and more brands starting in the UK and growing. They are all smaller brands, but it's a challenging market because there's not a demand for it. And, a lot of the bigger groups or the bigger restaurants, bars, there might not be a necessity for them to have more than 1 or 2 brands at the moment. So if there's 50, then, it's not, there's 50 and there's only 2 spots. It's going to become difficult. But as the category grows, don't want to, if you look at gin, which we always have to revert back to, unfortunately, or fortunately, don't want to be offensive. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and there's always a position for more and more, and there's rotation, and people want to try different things, and da-da-da. So I'm confident that it will come to that point, and as people's drinking habits change and they drink less and they want to drink more interesting stuff and they care about where their spirits have come from and how they're produced, certainly consumers' drinking habits will diversify and they'll want to try different agave spirits. But until people understand what those agave spirits are, we're going to be miles behind. And your average consumer in the UK doesn't know what mezcal is. They'll say, is it the smoky one? Or they say, oh, is that a type of tequila? Whereas in Mexico or the US, you talk about mezcal, everybody knows what mezcal is. Everybody knows what agave spirits is. They are familiar with tequila, mezcal, raicilla, bacanora, sotol. They know all of them. And we're barely scratching the surface with mezcal. So I think we've got a long way to go, but the way that people are consuming is certainly favourable for agave spirits.
And I hope that, yes, by speaking today, we can move people along that journey as well. And I think maybe, let's fill in. Let's do a sort of a little 101. What is mezcal? Where does it fit into the agave category? But, this is great because you're not speaking in this theoretical area. You're speaking from experience, having set up your own spirit, your own brand. So, talk us through, at a high level, the category, but then maybe, bring in some of the nuances, I guess, that you saw firsthand with Dangerous Don.
So mezcal is anything that is distilled from an agave plant, and it has a denomination of origin, which is a separate denomination of origin to tequila. Rather confusingly, within the category of mezcal, within that, you have subcategories of mezcal, tequila, then there's others that are raicilla, bacanora, sotol. They're all different types of agave spirits. Mezcal has its own denomination of origin, and it has to be made in now 12 states in Mexico. And there's certain regulations under which it needs to be produced to fit into 3 specific categories: Mezcal, artisanal Mezcal, and ancestral Mezcal. Within this Mezcal category, you've then got tequila, which has its own denomination of origin, has to be made in its own states with its own techniques, and it's made from a specific type of agave plant. Then you have other subcategories like Raicilla and Bacanora and Sotol, and again, they're just continuations of different regions, plants. So one of the things that I find the most amazing about agave spirits is the production process itself. It's such a labour of love. It's so time consuming from the plant right through the process. So agave plants are the most unproductive plants. They only flower once and they only have one time to be used. So, we're talking about a minimum of 5 years, and we can go up to in excess of 35 years. So unlike any other spirit in the world, if you think about a bourbon, they all pretty much start as the same product, and then they're put into barrels and humans rotate them and wood gives them their flavour. Agave spirits, it's sort of Mother Nature that are looking after the agave plants, and that's where the real flavour comes from. So first of all, you've got a very timely process in order of getting the plant to grow. Then the agave needs to be harvested. Now, some of these agave plants can be absolutely massive, like enormous, like over a metre at their base. And they've got these leaves coming out of them, they're like giant swords, basically, with, really sharp needles on the end. So it's not an easy task to remove those, and you need to remove them close enough to the piña, to the heart, in order for the flavour to be as good as it can be. So again, another incredible skill to get the leaves off, to harvest the plant. You're then left with the piña, which is the core, the heart, and that's then roasted. So in artisanal ancestral mezcal production, you will dig an underground oven. So this is an oven dug into the ground, and a fire is built, and then it's covered with rocks, usually volcanic rock. But so you've got this burning hot fire which is smoking. You've put rocks on top of it, and then you have these huge agaves which have been chopped in half or chopped up, and they're placed on top of this fire. So, but this is an outdoor oven, so there's no thermometer, there's no industrial process in which you can just control it. This is the skill of the master mezcalero in order to build that fire, cover it, and smoke it for the right amount of time to get the desired flavour profile. So once it's been smoked, it comes out of the ground and it needs to be crushed. There's different ways of crushing. Dangerous Don, we use a tahona. So a tahona is a big stone flat circle base with another stone wheel that rolls over the top of it, and that crushes the agave. So then once you've got the crushed agave, it goes into fermentation tanks. So Celso, my master mezcalero, uses wood. So the mash goes into this vats, the wooden vats, and then fermentation takes place. So with artisanal ancestral, it's all natural yeast, natural airborne yeast. So the yeast exists in the wood and in the air and the surrounding areas, and so fermentation takes place at that point. And then once it's fermented, all the mash and the matter goes into the still. So we use a copper still, and that's then twice distilled. What we do at that point is, you've got this twice distilled mezcal which is in the still. It goes back into the still, and we take Oaxacan coffee, medium roast it and coarsely grind it, and put that into the still and leave it for a day. So the coffee goes in the morning and one day, and then the next day the still is fired up and it's redistilled for a third time. But it's infused at this point. So what comes out is totally clear mezcal, but it's got this like coffee flavour to it. And it's a really old recipe my producer had. And again, this came back to the Frank days, back from the beginning when he was making a coffee, like basically a Mezcal Patron. And I knew the flavours would work, but I just wanted to find a way or find someone that was making it. And so Celso, when we met, he'd actually been making it with coffee and cacao. He makes an amazing one with cacao. And recently we've been experimenting with different herbs. And essentially it's a type of pechuga. So there's 3 main different types of agave, like a single variety mezcal, a blend of different agave plants, or something called a pechuga. And a pechuga is a celebratory mezcal where generally fruits get added to the still, and then it's redistilled, and they'll suspend a breast of something in the still. And traditionally it's turkey, but you know, I've tried them with iguana and rabbit and all sorts of things. So yeah, we essentially make a coffee pechuga, and I didn't really think about what I was doing when I started it. I just knew that these flavors were amazing, and I just wanted to find a way of combining them. And I was so fortunate to be introduced to Celso, and he'd been producing this product for such a long time. And I think what's been great with Dangerous Don, and with this product in particular, is mezcal can be quite intense. And although there is a mezcal that everyone will like, it's certainly an entry mezcal. I mean, people just enjoy drinking things with coffee, and so saying try a coffee mezcal, and especially, I mean, Dangerous Don is a slightly unique name, so try this coffee mezcal called Dangerous Don. Everyone gives it a try, and I've certainly found that people that may not necessarily be open to trying a mezcal are much more inclined to give it a go. So yeah, it's worked.
I think that's brilliant. I was just saying to you now, I think you're doing a great job for the Mexican Tourist Board as well, because I think having seen pictures of these and seen the production process in a very kind of textbooky way, all of this just sounds fantastic. And I just think it feels like the category needs just ambassadors to tell these stories and to get people excited. And I love the fact that you're making sort of a gateway mezcal really for a lot of people, and an entry point where it's not going to sort of scare them off. There's going to be familiar notes there, but it feels like it's going to be different enough to surprise people, but there's going to be enough there to bring them in and just get them excited, which I guess is the key thing. And speaking of which, kind of final question really is kind of looking ahead really to London Mezcal Week. Ask it nice and broad. Who is it for, and what might they expect to find if they come along and take a look?
So London Mezcal Week is for everybody, but everybody is welcome. But yeah, specifically people, I guess, that have got an interest in agave spirits. We definitely want bartenders to come down to understand to have a look at all the different spirits that are available. And like, mezcal's an expensive product, so we're trying to explain the reasons why, so that we can work with. A challenge is that we're always driven by price, but actually mezcal's an expensive product, so we shouldn't be being driven by price. We should be concentrating on the quality of the goods rather, So across the week it's running at TT Liquor, which is on Kingsland Road, at the bottom of Kingsland Road, just around the corner from Shoreditch Town Hall. And we have a whole week of events. We've got 2 partners, London Essence Company and Anotria, our trade partner. So on the Monday, we're doing a launch dinner with Santiago Lastra, who's a friend of mine, who's opening an amazing restaurant called Col next year, and with London Essence, and we'll be pairing food and mezcal. Tuesday, Penstore Mezcal is showing a film, and on Wednesday I'm doing a talk in connection with Wonderworks, Women in Drinks, and then on Thursday, Anotria are doing a panel discussion to talk about different ways of which bartenders can use agave spirits. But the main event for the whole week is the 2-day tasting, which is on the 19th and 20th of July, Friday and Saturday. Both days will be a 2-day tasting festival, essentially. So we'll have around 40 brands and over 65 different mezcals for people to try. Tickets are £35, and you have access to the building for the whole day, so you can try as many different mezcals in as long a period as you want. We've got people speaking each day. We've got brand ambassadors. We've got 2 guys over from Italy who are appointed by the CRM, so the Mezcal Authority body, as official Mezcal ambassadors, and they're going to be over and talking. We've got Tom Bullock, who I spoke about earlier. We've got Jesse Estes, Thomas Estes' son, from Ocho Tequila. He'll be there. Yeah, we've just got a variety of different speakers across the 2 days. So it's definitely an opportunity for anyone and everyone to learn about agave spirits. It's for bartenders to, I guess, widen their knowledge, distributors to see if there's anyone else they can work with, just people that care about good spirits and want to understand and, learn more about what they're consuming.
Thank you so much to Thea. I really enjoyed our chat. And I'm really glad that it was you who has introduced the Mezcal category to my listeners. Please see below for the website and main social media handles for Dangerous Don and London Mezcal Week. As previously mentioned, I'll be releasing a special 7-part series to cover London Mezcal Week. This will feature talks and interviews from the sessions. As mentioned at the start, there will be options available to sponsor this series, which for the right brand will be a fantastic way to reach an engaged audience. If you'd like more information, do please contact me. I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, and email hello@interpretingwine.com. See you next time.